you can't have this consistent idea of a loving God matched up, at least to me, with the idea of, but he made all this knowing most people would never find him and he was going to torture them in hell for the rest of their lives. Like, why? I don't know if that is your view of God and how it works and it's that simple. How do you want to worship that entity? I get, holy awe and fear. Yeah. But perfect love has no fear, right? I mean, it says that in the Bible. So I don't know for the Christians who believe that version of it. I don't fit with that mindset. Yeah. And before I researched it more fully, that was one of the things where I thought, well, maybe I can't be a Christian because I can't buy into that version of God. Yeah, right. No, I think that makes all the sense in the world. And I think that's a really thoughtful answer. For me personally, the why always goes back to Jesus. And it's this idea that in Jesus, we see the fullness of God on display. And if that's true, and by the way, that the seal of that promise is the resurrection. That's why I always tell people, figure out what you think about the resurrection of Jesus. Yeah. And then you'll figure out what you think about Jesus. And then you'll figure out what you think about Scripture in that order. And sometimes we try to figure out Leviticus before we figure out the resurrection, and it's no wonder we get all screwed up about it. But if the central claim of Christianity is that God himself came to be one of us, with us, God with us, Emmanuel, for the purpose of solving our biggest problem, which is death, really, and death and isolation from him. And to take care of that by taking the cross on himself and saying, they're going to come for me, they're going to have their way with me, and I'm going to overcome. And then he did it. If that's the central claim of Christianity, then we extrapolate from there. Like, that's the nature of God. He's a problem solver. He's a come and get us kind of God. He's not a distant, angry from on high kind of God. He's an end of the dirt with us. Let's fix this together. Follow me out of this hell. Like, that's that kind of God we see in Jesus. And that's so unique among all religions, by the way. That's such a unique claim that I'm not even sure you can call Christianity a religion. It's like, it's not up to us. Yeah. It's all up to God. And all we get to do is say, okay, that's it. It's not a merit-based system. If that's the reality about Jesus, we believe that's the reality about the ultimate being in the universe. That's where we get all this idea that God is love. And if God is love, then certain things can't be true about God that we unfortunately often communicate to the world, like we being Christian pastors, right? Like, we often communicate to the world that it is a merit-based system, and we are here to just crush you with expectations and rules and laws and just press you like a lump of coal into a diamond, know? And if you just let us keep pressing you and oppressing you with all of these rules, then one day you'll be this beautiful diamond. That's not Christianity. Yeah. I don't know what that is, but that's not Christianity. Right. I think, what was helpful for me at one point where I sort of came to some level of peace with this is as I was researching all this, I had this day where this image came into my mind of, this great divide, this chasm between these two sides of land, and the cross falling over and like bridging. It's a very common sermon illustration. Oh, okay. I just like came in, and there are some who would accuse me of I guess where I've landed now is being like more of a universalist type mindset, but I don't believe all roads lead to God in the sense that, well, if you can believe Buddhism and that gets you to God, and you can believe I think there's a version of God that's true that is all those different versions are mutually exclusive of one another. So I'm not saying, well, as long as you're a good Buddhist and you believe it wholeheartedly, that'll get you in. I guess what I'm saying more is that I get frustrated with Christians who want to make it so black and white that you do ABC step and you're in, and if you don't do ABC step, you're out. To me, the cross is the bridge, and there's all kind of highways that lead onto that cross and that bridge that is a bit of a mystery in some senses that we can't fully, optimize it and quantify it and boil it down to this mechanistic, process that's, A plus B equals C kind of a thing. Now, with that said,
the other piece of it is, well, let's say you're one who does believe, well, it is, you have to believe these certain things. Well, there's people who believe all those certain things about Jesus, and yet they're hurting people. So they believe the right things, but their deeds are hurting people. And then you have people who may not believe the right things, quote unquote, but are actually loving people the way Jesus would want them to. And so it's kind of like, well, the Christian would say, well, if there's a person who believes the right things, but they're not doing the right things, they're not really a Christian. So you're saying you can believe the right things and do the wrong things and not be be saved. Well, why not the possibility you could maybe believe some of the wrong things, but do the right things, have a posture of humility and seeking God, and possibly be saved? Like, why can't it, if it's on the one hand possible, why not the other? And, I think about this example, something that really, just cut to my core. I was reading my boys this biography about a Polish doctor during World War II. He was Jewish. His name was Janusz Borzak, I think was his name. And Korczak was his name. He was the most amazing man. He had these schools for orphans. And mind you, he wasn't a Christian. He was Jewish. He rejected Jesus. But during World War II, when his little Jewish orphanages were put into the ghettos of Warsaw, he went with them. He had opportunities through his connections, because he was well-to-do, had all these, academic connections. He had the chance to get papers signed for him so he could get out of there when they were coming to round up the kids and stuff. And he decided, no, I'm not going to send these kids off to the concentration camps. Where they go, I go. I'm going to go with them. And so he marched with them. He calmed them. He's like, we're going to go on this train. He knew it was coming, but he chose to go with them. And he was killed with them in a gas chamber. And this is a guy who on paper rejected Jesus, probably for how he was raised. And it's like, you can't tell. So you're going to tell me he's in hell? And yet you've got the people who ran the Inquisitions in Spain, who were, these good Catholic Christians who believed all the right things, and they're burning people at the stake in the name of Jesus. And they're, you know what I'm saying? So there's like this mystery here
I know what you're saying, Grace. I do. And I've been frustrated by the same thing. It's just, it feels to me like you're arguing against a certain Christian.
Okay.
And not against Christianity. And you're worked up, rightfully so. Like Jesus got worked up about the same things. And that's just, I want to reiterate that again and again. Like what you're worked up about, absolutely in step with Jesus. Jesus got mad at the self-righteous people who said, I don't need a doctor. He's like, I'm just here to heal the sick. Well, from Jesus's perspective, everybody's sick. But those who don't know they're sick or won't admit they're sick, they'll never come for a healing. And so the people who frustrated Jesus frustrate you, which tells me like, chase that heart of Christ. Don't punish his movement for the,
Well, right. And that's kind of where I've landed. But I guess it still, at least for me, feels kind of fringy to think that way. Yeah. I know so many Christians. I mean, I've heard people say to my face, because we've talked about this. No, I think people, Jewish people are going to hell. Like, I think they're going to hell. And I'm like, I think actually what you and I here are talking about is a little fringy. I mean, I don't know. I think there's a lot more people than you would think who actually are like, well, maybe I've never thought about it, but I do think you have to accept Jesus or you're going to hell. And I hope I would implore people to, you don't have to agree with like where I've landed, but at least consider the implications for it being so stringent. What if you're slightly wrong? Don't you hope there's mercy? Like if you're wrong, don't you hope there's some degree of mercy or mystery to like, God knows the heart. It's none of us can prescribe, the exact prescription that it needs to look like. Sure.
I want to be clear too in saying, as I'm empathizing with you, I also believe that Christ is essential for salvation.
And I do too.
I'm not sure we know entirely what that means and who can be included or not. But when Jesus says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, no one comes to the Father but through me, I believe him.
And I do too.
Because I believe Jesus, and because of the resurrection, again, sort of that's the order of things for me. It's like, it's how it works. But I think for any Christian to say so-and-so is in hell or that group's going to hell, it's just wasted breath. It's Ecclesiastes-esque, like chasing after the wind. It's just like vanity. It's worthless talk. Like, we have no idea. We have no way of knowing. Only the Father knows, like, who goes to heaven, who goes to hell. What business do we have, unless we're Jesus? What business do we have making such predictions and blanket statements that only do harm? So I'm right there with you.
Well, so what would you say are the point of missions then? Like going on mission trips? I've heard, growing up, a lot of hype around, we've got to go evangelize because people are going to hell. I mean, I've heard that exact.
Sure, they are. We don't know who. We know some. Mm-hmm. And it's not that Christians believe we have the best in terms of what we talked about earlier with, love your neighbor, take care of the poor. That's in a lot of religions. We believe we have the best why. And that is a God who is with us, a God who wants relationship with us, a God who became one of us, like died for us and rose for us. Like, that's the why that drives all the what stuff. And so the why is what we go to convert people to. It's not to get them to behave better. It's because we want the world to know this is who God really is. Mm-hmm. And it's not so we can have notches on our Christian belts, like, look how many souls we saved from hell today, which is, I know how missions often worked, especially in the past, some even now. It's really about wanting the whole world to know, like the first Christians did. This is who God really is. It's Jesus on the cross, in the tomb, rising from the tombs. Like, that's God and the fullness of God. And so we're so energized by that. We can't not go on missions.
Yeah. I think this kind of touches back on a little bit of, we talked earlier in this episode about how words matter. And I think what you're saying is so right. But I think sometimes, at least just, and I could be off here, I think what happens sometimes is we do throw around jargony phrases. Maybe hearts are in the right place, but it's just how it's always been described, or why we do this or that or the other.
Sure.
And maybe the heart's in the right place, but sometimes the wording of some of this doesn't capture the nuance of the discussion we're having. And it is more strident. It is more, we have to go on missions because if we don't go, there's a chance the person doesn't hear it on the right day, and then they're going to hell. And so it was like, what was it all like this arbitrary? If you happen to hear the good news, I mean, what I believe is that God knows who is going to respond. He'll make sure if you or I drop the ball and are not evangelizing at the coffee shop one day, but there was someone we could have impacted. Well, God will make sure someone gets to them. So to me, it's like the why of the evangelizing isn't, well, we have to, it's our job to save people from hell. It's like, God's going to do that. Like, if none of us were here, he could still do that for people.
But you can see how that would be like an excuse to not do anything.
Well, no, but I think to me, evangelizing is a gift that's given to us, not a duty that we have to save people. It's like, God's going to do this stuff. He's kingdom building. He doesn't need us. It's a gift to us to get to join with him in what he's already doing versus this arbitrary, God sent me to go evangelize on, this country, and I didn't go that week. And so this person, as a result, went to hell because, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, in my church growing up, and a lot of churches where I grew up in the Bible Belt, taught not just that, but like, if you don't do missions, the lost people's blood is on your hands. Yeah. I remember being like traumatized by that as a kid. And I remember even going in high school after this high school trip where I talked about, you guys, we have to do more because their blood's going to be on our hands.
Yeah.
And that's a horrible image. And I know it's pulled out of some proof text from scripture that's like out of context and all of that. But that image really sticks with you, and the trauma of that can really, I think, harm our theology long term.
Yeah.
But I do think one thing that's interesting from the New Testament is there are no evangelism training courses, like as though it is a compartmentalized thing, like it's just something we have to do as a church because the lost won't be saved without us. Yeah. You don't see that in the Bible. Yeah. You see that in a lot of our churches today, I guess. But in the New Testament, what you see, what we call evangelism, would just be basically winsomeness and joy, exuberance. Like when the people observed the first Christians and they said, those people look drunk because they're having such a good time together because the Spirit overcame them and they just look like a party. And for me, Christian evangelism is really just a better party than the parties the world throws.